my name's Jessie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my full series review for the Winternight trilogy by Catherine Arden. So a quick summary: The Bear and the Nightingale, the first book in this series, follows a character named Vasilisa who lives in this Russian-inspired world where she, as a child, realizes she can see these things called demons or domovoi, and so she is responsible for caring for them, for communicating with them, to make sure that the balance remains between like humans and demons so that they don't get angry and do anything horrible. And so in this very religious society that she lives in, she's actually condemned for being able to see these demons and is called a witch, and so has to go on this kind of adventure in this very prejudiced world against her as what would be considered a witch during this time. That's all I really want to say. I don't want to give too much away, but what I will say about this series is, first of all, if you start off with The Bear and the Nightingale, the first thing you're going to realize with this series is how atmospheric and beautiful the writing style is, but it also does read a little bit fairy tale-like, where some folks may not love it because it's a little bit slower paced, and especially in The Bear and the Nightingale, the story is very contained. The first half of this book really takes a long time to build up the characters and the world, and so a lot of folks probably, if they read The Bear and the Nightingale and don't love it, may be hesitant to continue on with the series, just because this is a pretty slow book in general, but you can't deny that it's also very beautiful and atmospheric. So that may not be for everyone, but what I will say is if you get through The Bear and the Nightingale and like it, then I highly suggest you continue on with the series, especially The Girl in the Tower, because you'll realize that the story, while it was very contained in The Bear and the Nightingale, it was a smaller scope, just about this one little village. The stakes in The Girl in the Tower are raised so much more for all of the characters involved, and you really start getting into a more plot-driven novel and series versus The Bear and the Nightingale that felt very character-driven. So even if you're not a huge fan of the first book in this series, this is one where I highly recommend you keep going with it, because you may actually end up loving it. And that was kind of my experience. I liked The Bear and the Nightingale. It wasn't my favorite just because of the pacing. It was very slow. It was a little bit hard to get into at first. But then it ended in a way that was very intriguing and wanted to make me continue on. And I am so glad I did, because it quickly became one of my favorite series. So that is not the case with every series out there. Usually when I read a series, depending on how that first book goes, that's how the rest of the series will be for me. So if the first book was 3 stars, it's usually where I'll read the rest of the books and they're all 3 stars. And that's just not the case with this one. So for me, I ended up giving The Bear and the Nightingale 4 stars, but I gave The Girl in the Tower and The Winter of the Witch 5 stars each, because they were so fast-paced and the characters were just so much fun to follow. You really became invested in their stories. The character of Vasilisa as well is one of the best fantasy protagonists I have ever read about. She is so strong, so confident, and she's not described as the pretty girl. So a lot of times in fantasy, or really any book, the main female protagonist is described as very beautiful or pretty, and Vasilisa, our main character in this series, is actually described as the opposite, where she's not very attractive, but yet she's so confident with herself and has this charm about her that just captivates everyone around her. And it's so fun to read about this kind of character who isn't that typical pretty female fantasy protagonist, and instead is just so concentrated on being independent, being strong, fighting for what she believes in. I think that that is awesome. I love Vasilisa's character. She truly is one of my favorite characters now of all time. So the other characters in this series are a lot of fun as well. It's not just Vasia's character that's really fun to follow, but the rest of the characters are also great. And there's a small budding romance that takes place in this series that is so much fun to follow, and it's hinted at in the first book just a teeny bit, but it really grows in the second and third books, and I personally loved it. I don't want to say what the relationship is, but if you read it, I hope that you also agree with me that it is such a sweet romance, and it's perfect for Vasia. It doesn't hold her back in any way. She becomes empowered through it, and it's just awesome. I love the romance in this series, and usually I'm not a huge fan of romances in fantasy, but this one did it so well and in such a mature way that I fell in love with it. The other thing I'll say is Katherine Arden, the author of this series, studied French and Russian literature in college, and you can really tell how passionate she is about the Russian literature and culture that she's writing about in these books. I think she represents it really well, and I love that we have a glossary of terms in the back, and she really does back up everything she's talking about. And she even, in her author's notes at the end of these books, makes notes on true things, true historical events that she was trying to retell in more of a fairy tale way, but it's still referencing real people who lived during this time. It's still referencing real battles that took place. So I also found that really interesting, and it wasn't something I was expecting to learn about going into this series. There is that somewhat historical nonfiction aspect to it as well, because you're really truly reading about people who lived, breathed, and were in these battles. Granted, they weren't as fairy tale-like, but it is a lot of fun to read her retellings of these true events. Overall, how I would sum up this series is it's truly atmospheric. It's a perfect wintertime read, in my opinion, because the atmosphere in it always takes place in the wintertime, and Katherine Arden just transports you to this world so well and really describes the scenery in such a gorgeous way. I can't wait to go back, reread, and mark some of my favorite quotes from these books, because oh my goodness, I'm sure there's so many of them that are present throughout this series. It's super atmospheric. If you're just looking for a very immersive world to get lost in, this is such a great series for it. The characters are so well done, and even if you don't love The Bear and the Nightingale, give The Girl in the Tower a shot, because I guarantee you, you will be very impressed with how Katherine Arden really raises the stakes for all of the characters and makes the plot a lot more at the center of these books. Whereas, yes, we still get all of that beautiful character work, but we also get to follow some really fun action and battle scenes. So this series was so much fun to read. I can't recommend it enough. I'm so glad I read it, and overall, this goes down as a 5-star series, in my opinion. I was very happy with how it ended. So that is a quick series review for the Winternight trilogy. Have you all read this series? What did you think of it? Please leave your comments down below. I love talking with you guys about these books. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And until next time, bye!